Welcome back, dear viewers. You're still watching Nile Cruise with Hala Al-Hamalawi and myself, Mohammed Abdelrahim. You're from the Egypt Post Office Museum in Al-Ataba in downtown Cairo. Last July, His Excellency, the President, inaugurated via video conference the Postal Museum here after its development and restoration within the framework of the launch of a number of Digital Egypt projects. And we are going to be talking about this here in the program with our dear guest, Dr. Hiba Barakat, advisor to the chairman of the Egypt Post for Museum Affairs. Dr. Hiba, a great pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the Egyptian Postal Museum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hiba. We'd like to know when and why was the Egyptian Museum established?
Well, the story takes us back to 1930s when King Fuad decided to move the organization, the postal organization, from Alexandria to Cairo. And when he did that, he decided that it is time to create a postal museum. So our postal museum starts at that point, but it was ready in 1934, and it was ready to welcome the participants of the 10th conference of the UPU. UPU means that the Universal Postal Service Union, and that is a big organization, and we actually had a conference here in 1934, and that's why they actually created this museum.
You said it was transferred from Alexandria to Cairo. I mean, talk to us about that, and why was it in Alexandria in the first place? Of course, Alexandria is the leader, I mean, since the days of Alexander the Great, but talk to us about that, please.
Okay, why is it in Alexandria? Because everything was actually, all the businesses were in Alexandria. So when Khidive Ismail decided to create a postal authority, he decided that its place is in Alexandria. Alexandria is a hub for culture and for trade, and it is where all the mail will be shipped through the boats to Europe, and actually also from Alexandria to Cairo via the railway, and then from Cairo to Suez and down the Red Sea. So Alexandria played a very important role during this period. But by 1930, King Fuad decided it is time to bring all of these governmental organizations to Cairo. And when he did that, one of them was the postal authorities. And they decided to come to Ataba. Ataba Square was a very important square. First, it was next to a lot of other businesses and governmental units. It is in the Ismailiya quarter that this small entity was established. But when he decided to bring it to Cairo, this building was such a small building that it would not actually host all of the people coming from Alexandria, shifting their career from Alexandria to Cairo. So they decided to rebuild this area and to bring two buildings together and create the beautiful facade that we have today with the tower, which we call the clock tower.
Nice. Now, during the reign of Ismail Pasha, Posta Europa was bought by the Egyptian government. And what was the significance of that move, Dr. Hiba? And to what extent did it serve to boost the postal services here in Egypt?
Okay, that was a very important move. Earlier, during the 19th century, early 19th century, all the postal services were occupied or were taken by European companies. And earlier than that, it was more private rather than an organized unit. So when Khidive Ismail heard that there is a company called the Posta Europea, and they are coming from Italy, which have actually established a postal service here, and so they are responsible to taking your mail and delivering your mail internally and abroad as well, internationally. So this organization, this company, came to Khedive Ismail to actually tell them more about their business here in Egypt. And it was a very flourishing business. And Khedive Ismail thought about it. He said, this organization, this company has to become part of the government. It has to be an entity, it has to be an institution in the government. And that's why he decided to buy it. He did not just buy this company, he bought the company with all its offices around town, and also all of its services. And he asked the director of this company to remain in position, become the first head of the organization here in Cairo for at least 10 years. This is to guarantee that the service will continue properly and that all the people will not feel that there has been a rupture.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, Dr. Hiba, when you're talking to us, I mean, glimpses of flashes of history are coming to mind. When you mentioned that the company was in Italy, I was just reminded, Hala, of the saying, all roads lead to Rome. I mean, when we said the post office was originally Alexandria, it was, again, during the days of Alexander the Great. So again, this has to do with Rome. When you said Al-Ataba, that important place here in Cairo, I think the Egyptian stock market headquarters is just around. Also, the Central Bank of Egypt headquarters is just around. So, I mean, it seems that whenever you talk about the post office or the, anything to do with the mail or the post, it's history. You're talking about history. It seems so.
Today we are talking about history, but in reality, the postal service continues and develops, but it continues because it started somewhere. And when we decided to have this museum in 1930s, it was to record what those officials have actually decided to bring into Cairo, to Egypt, during the earlier phase, during the 19th century. So it was to record it and to make this organization proud of its history, but also to see the future. So the way that they have actually organized the museum early on, it was with the state of the arts in museums. So that was the whole idea, is that I take from the past and invest into the future, and that is exactly what we are doing today.
Yes. Dr. Hiba, what are the areas of cooperation between the Egyptian Post Museum and other Egyptian museums? What are the desired goals of such cooperation? And if you could just give us examples of such cooperation.
Okay, we are keen actually to work with the Egyptian museums across Egypt, and the idea is that the postal authorities and Egypt Post has always had a significant role in all of the museums. For example, if I name any museum, like the Museum of the Nile Museum in Aswan, for example, Egypt, we have actually produced several stamps related to the development of the Niles, the cataracts, and so on. So in a way, Egypt Post has its fingerprint on every museum. So that is exactly what we want to do, is we want to reach to these museums and we communicate with them to tell them that our stamps represent your museum, and accordingly create an information panel that would actually give a little bit of the history of this specific museum to them, and then we present it to them for them to hang. For example, if we talk about the Museum of Nubia, also in Aswan, beautiful museum that has been launched by the UNESCO, and it is very well done. So, but we have a story to tell. We have a story. How did the mail reach Nubia? How did this mail actually travel? Was it with the boats, or was it with the camels? So we feel that it is our responsibility today to actually communicate with these museums across Egypt, to tell them how we have actually reached these governorates and these other entities different ways. So I think it's going to be our fingerprint, the museum's fingerprint, the Egypt Post's fingerprint in all of the Egyptian museums.
Since you talked about the future, Dr. Heba, and we're talking about a digital world today, so to what extent has digital transformation or technology played a role in your museum here?
Technology has changed the world, actually. Now in the 21st century, we are seeing how technology can help in facilitating the visits in museums. So for us, technology played two roles. One is to outreach to organizations and to museums like us abroad via Zooms and via communication and via our website. So we are now building up a beautiful website with a lot of information that will give us another facet outside of Egypt. But in our museum itself, we have used several applications that enhances the visitors' trip to the museum. One of them is we use the augmented reality application on the timeline, which is behind me. And the whole idea is that augmented reality applications can give me the opportunity anytime after I have printed this timeline to add information. The more information that I can search and add, the more it will be interesting to my visitor. I also have QR codes that are not only audio but also visual. So it's a small video that talks about specific objects around the museum. That also creates a lot of interest from our visitors. And above all, we have a welcoming statement. So when you enter the museum, you have a touch screen, which we call the avatar. And when you want to know anything, for example, you want to know specific object that you want to reach, so you can actually ask this avatar and it will give you the answer. If you want to have a very short visit, like half an hour, and I know our museum is large, we are 15 galleries, so it can take much longer than that. So you can actually create your own path and it will tell you which rooms or which galleries are very important. Also, the avatar can give you much more information. For example, if you want to know when you exit, which direction you go, where is the metro station, it will give you this information. So that is where technology creates this kind of easying up of the visitor. So it really enhances the visitor's experience.
Yes. The museum has developed also new posters, Dr. Heba, and banners to give detailed information, as you said. Now, the purpose behind that move?
Of course, we want to reach out to people. We want people to know about the museum, and using posters and all kinds of advertisements actually plays an important role. But also, if we can use these posters to reach out to students in schools, that will be part of what they will actually be seeing every day. They will know about our museum, and if any of us goes for an outreach program to these schools, they will actually enjoy it. So we feel that the more that we advertise through posters and through information panels, the more we will be known, and that we will actually have an important effect on our community.
Do you get school trips and university visits and here to the museum? Other than, of course, the regular visits by foreigners or domestic tourists here, Dr. Heba?
Okay, at the moment, since we just launched a couple of weeks ago, and it is of course summer, we have not yet actually had any. But we also feel that outreach programs is more important. So if I can send one of my curators to talk about the museum, to give a little bit of a history about its services, then we invite them to come. It will make much more, like effect. We want to also to contribute in their development, not just what they come and see as a glimpse and they go out with very little information. No, we want to actually help them not just enjoy, but also in a way learn a little bit. Because our museum, actually, it is a museum about Egypt. It's about Egypt's history. So what you see is actually part of Egypt's history, part of my history. It is our identity. We must all be very proud of.
Yes. Dr. Hiba, elaborating on what Mohammed was saying about using technology, the museum is always attractive for those who see things on display, but for the less fortunate, perhaps they need some assistance. The visually impaired, not even reading about it was an option before the implementation of the Braille system. Now, would you tell us more about this system and how can the visitors who are visually impaired actually enjoy or know more about the museum?
So I think now we are looking at all kinds of target groups. And we as museum officials talk about our visitors as target groups. We target them. And we try to actually identify who will come and then provide the service. One of those people are the visually impaired. And they are very important. And actually, when we were building up this museum, we had few visits from people who were visually impaired. And we started to think with them, see with their own eyes, understand how touch plays an important, a role in their lives. And then we decided to take them around to test. Accordingly, we did two things. We created in every gallery a Braille caption in English and Arabic. And we also understood that when we talk about stamps, they really have never seen a stamp. So they need to visually see it through their eyes. So we created in a 3D printers objects that looks like stamp, enlarged, for them to touch and for them to understand. When I talk about a stamp with side issues or side, like hubs, so they actually can touch it and they can understand it. That is the first point. Okay, the second point is that we realized that those who are visually impaired cannot actually walk in museums alone. So we asked them, how can we facilitate this visit? So they said that if they have carpets that can guide them so that they don't bump into modular cases, that would help. And accordingly, we decided that the entire museum will have carpets that will guide all visitors for them to not to actually bump into modular cases, as they said, and at the same time to help those visually impaired who are walking with sticks to be able to have a guide on the floor that will actually lead them to the next gallery one by one. And this way we actually won this target group. But they were not the only target group that needed actually help. So we also had wheelchair visitors. So what do? We had to make sure that all of our galleries, you have ramps that can bring you in, bring you out. And when there are steps, you have to have somehow a way for them to maneuver. So we decided that there are 2 elevators that will be used for those with wheelchairs. And the elevators had to fit the wheelchair with an accompanied person. So anyway, a lot of issues, but we were keen to actually invite all of those target groups who are not just common visitors that needed some assistance to the museum.
Great, Dr. Hiba, and we thank you for that, and we must commend your efforts on helping the people with special abilities to enjoy the great pieces of art that are here at the Postal Museum. On this note, we thank you very much, Dr. Heba Barakat, the advisor to the chairman of the Egypt Post for Museum Affairs, and thank you again for hosting us. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Heba. Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll go for a short break and we'll be right back to continue our tour here at the Egyptian Post Museum.